Are you feeling overwhelmed by the terms that are being thrown around like LLC, sole proprietorship, S-Corp, C-Corp, corporations, DBAs, trade names? You're not alone, okay? I see things online. I get confused by what these people are talking about, but I'm here to really help you understand your options, what you get, what you need, what you don't need, and really what could be holding back your business and potentially exposure to liability or exposure to more taxes than you need to be paying. So let's break it down for you. I'm an attorney, Jonathan Feniak, and I focus on business structuring, asset protection, privacy, and tax mitigation. And let's give you the information here today so that you can move forward with confidence. This video is just a quick, high-level, clarifying explanation of business entity types and taxation to help you understand what decisions, when it comes to the business type and when it comes to the tax election, which ones are right for you. This should serve as a jumping off point for further research for you, okay? We're gonna talk about, at least we'll get the terminology right. You'll walk out of here with the definitions from an attorney who specializes in this area. But it's not an in-depth discussion of every possibility in every different area. Keep that in mind. Business entity types, okay? Let's talk about them. And I sometimes, I don't want to say confuse myself, but I confuse people when I'm talking about it because tax, election, and entity type are very closely intertwined. And people often use tax terms to describe business entities. I've got an S-Corp. No, you don't. Right? And so we're going to, and I apologize in advance if I veer off track and start talking about tax. I'm going to try to stay focused here, right? Let's talk about business entity types. Business entity types happen at the state level. You've got a sole proprietorship is the most basic entity type. It's actually a misnomer. It's not an entity type. It's just you operating a business without a business entity. There's nothing you form with the state. There's nothing you file with the state. It's just you going out and saying, I am going to start this business. Okay, that's a sole proprietorship. The downside of a sole proprietorship, well, the upside of a sole proprietorship, it's easy. There's no fees to pay. There's no filings due. There's no administration due. You got to make sure you report the income. I'm talking about taxes. Don't talk about taxes, John. It's super easy to do, right? The downside is you have liability. If I love tacos, if I decide I'm going to open up a taco stand, I'm going to sell tacos, and someone gets sick from my tacos and I've got a sole proprietorship, they're suing me as an individual. If they win, they could take my car, they could take my house, they could take my bank account. That's where the downside of a sole prop is. The next level up, get that protection. That's an LLC, a limited liability company. That does involve a filing with the state. You file articles of organization with the state in which you're operating, and it limits your liability, meaning that the value of the business is at risk. The amount of money I put into the business for the taco business is at risk, but it's limited to that. The person would sue the company, and then that would be the end of it. I would not be held personally responsible. There's a lot of sort of caveats to that, but we won't talk about that here. I will not be held personally responsible. It's popular because it's easy. Simple filing with the state. Administratively, it's easy to do. There is a little bit of cost involved from a tax. Not supposed to talk about taxes yet. We'll talk about taxes later on. So LLCs are easy to set up, and they provide that limited liability protection. Limited liability companies, okay? Company, limited liability company, not limited liability corporation. That confuses me. It drives me crazy. Corporations are different than LLCs. LLC, limited liability company, versus a corporation, two different sets of laws. Standard Uniform Corporations Act, Standard Uniform Limited Liability Company Act. Keep those things in mind. Also, don't get confused. S-Corp, C-Corp, tax, those are tax elections. Those are not entity types. So just want to make sure I have that clarifying point there, because I hear limited liability corporation all the time, and it makes my ears ring and my head hurt. Corporations are another entity type. It's formed at the state level. Corporations, not so easy, right? Corporations have multiple layers of ownership and control. Corporations have shareholders. Shareholders appoint or elect a board. The board then elects or appoints officers, meeting minutes, special, votes, all these other things in order to comply with the corporation's bylaws or state law. There's a lot of things you need to do. Corporations, though, are great for some companies. When typically a larger company, right? You've got investors, you've got people you want to put on the board, you've grown, you've got a CEO, a CFO, all of those things. Those are great uses of a corporation. Most people, though, only need an LLC. Very few need a sole prop because they have zero liability associated with their business. So that's really the three main business types you'll hear about. There's a fourth one. There's a fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh one. We're not going to talk about it. We'll talk for a minute here about nonprofits. What's a nonprofit? A nonprofit is a business organization that's formed with the state. You file documents to form it. It's usually a nonprofit corporation. And the difference with a nonprofit corporation, there's no shareholders, right? Who owns the corporation or who owns the nonprofit? People tell me I own the nonprofit. No, you don't. Nonprofits don't have owners. They have a board, they have people in control, but it is the funds of the nonprofit. It's supposed to be used toward charitable goals. So nonprofits, and I think there's a lot of people who are getting bad information, start your own nonprofit. Record-keeping requirements, IRS scrutiny, state scrutiny, registration, so on and so forth. Not as easy as they sound. Other business structures that are out there, there are statutory trusts, there's professional corporations, PLLCs, L3Cs, that all of these different things, those are usually pretty niche. Most people, an LLC is the right choice. If you think you might need something else, then you should probably talk to a professional. Now, interestingly, DBAs are something that people often confuse with LLCs. A lot of sole proprietors, Jonathan, me, I want to open up my taco truck, but I want to call it World's Best Tacos. I'll say, you know what I'll do? I'm going to file a DBA with the state. That DBA will allow me to hold myself out to the public as World's Best Tacos, right? I do not have any asset protection with that. All it is it's saying, hey, Jonathan wants to go and do business in this name of the World's Best Tacos, but there's no asset protection. It's not a business entity. There's no limited liability. So if you think you want a DBA, you probably want a DBA for the sole proprietorship. Instead, what you probably want is a DBA for your LLC. That's really cool because it allows you, let's say you got a business and you're selling clothing. And you're going to sell clothing to kids, you're going to sell clothing to women, you're going to sell clothing to men. And you want to have three different brands you're starting. But you got one manufacturer, one warehouse you're sending all out from. Someone would say, form three companies. Wrong. Because if you have three companies, the expectation is you're going to have three bank accounts, you're going to have three warehouses, you're going to have three manufacturing facilities. That doesn't work for most companies. So instead, what you would have is one company and then DBAs for the three brands. This allows you to present yourself to the public with a nickname, establish that brand identity, but that then you are not forced to have a huge administrative burden, and you still get all of that asset protection from having your LLC. So now that we've talked about the business types, let's talk about tax election, okay? Difference. I like to view it like you go into a restaurant and they say, oh, you choose one item from column A and one item from column B. Column A is your state level entity type. Column B is your tax election. Okay, they are mix and match. There's some restrictions on it. We'll keep it fairly high level here, but you can have an LLC that makes an S-Corp election. You can have a corporation that makes an S-Corp election. You can have an LLC that makes a C-Corp election. You can have an LLC that's treated as a partnership. You can do all of these things. So it's mix and match, right? So you have to think about, and this is a big mistake I see. People are, I need an S-Corp, so they form a corporation. You've subjected yourself to that higher record keeping, all that administrative burden, the board, the shareholders, so on and so forth, when really all you needed was that S-Corp or C-Corp election. And so you should have formed an LLC, lower administrative burden, and then made the election. So when you form your company, you should get an EIN number. EIN number, go to the IRS or you have somebody do it for you, get you an EIN number, and there's default classifications. Default is you tell the IRS, because most people, the IRS is like, look, everybody goes with the same thing, right? Single member LLC, default tax election is disregarded entity. You've got a multi-member LLC, default tax election is a partnership. You got a corporation, default tax election is C-Corp. That is your default, but you're not stuck with it. You can change your tax election by filing various forms with the IRS. There's rules about when you can do it. There's rules about how far back in time or far forward you can do, or, you know, so on and so forth. But the important thing here is to understand there's flexibility built into the system. And so what I want you to do is not think you're stuck with the default tax election. Make the business entity type that's best for you, best decision for you, and then make the best tax election for you. And here's the other secret. You can change. You can change your LLC to a corporation. You can change your LLC with a partnership tax status to an LLC with an S-Corp tax status or with a C-Corp tax status. So you can do these things over time as your company grows and changes. So what do I want you to do here? I want you to dig into these topics. If you think you're confused, I guess if you think you're confused, if you're confused, then definitely dig into the topics. And I also want to highlight the importance of talking to a professional. There can be tax consequences here, guys. There's liability consequences here, guys. So you want to make sure that you're getting good advice. At the end of the day, if you want to go on the cheap, you don't want to talk to maybe you're an introvert, you don't like talking to people. Most people just have an LLC, benefit from an LLC with the default tax classification. Start there, see how it goes, and then grow. Watch the next video to learn more about LLCs, about tax elections, all of those things. So look forward to keeping up the conversation with you.